All right. So one of the things that I like to ask every guest is to sort of like outline a typical week of training. So Matt, can we start with you? So what would it? So I guess like thinking, you're kind of near the comp phase. So it's not like your first week of training after a break or anything like that. And
Yep.
we're not having to kind of like factor in that we're racing that week. But what would a typical sort of week of training typically look like for you?
Yeah, so typical week of training for me, at least, it's pretty basic for me. So like it'd probably be 3 track sessions a week, whether that's on grass or on the rubber.
Hmm.
One gym session in there as well, and we'd probably split it that there's definitely one speed night, one tempo, and then probably gym or maybe just even a flush session. So it's not very like my sessions aren't very complex, but
Hmm.
they're pretty simple too. I found that over the years that if you make it too complex, I think sometimes you're doing too much and it's easier just to back it off. Like you take it like, see, if you're training since you're 12, you've been doing 5 sessions a week. By the time you get a little bit older, you don't, I believe you don't really have to do 5 sessions a week to get the same benefit. You might drop down to 4 sessions a week. So, yeah.
Hmm. Yeah. And I think like kind of going back to a point you made earlier about having the distraction of working and overthinking and all
Yeah.
that kind of stuff. And I think it's the same thing in terms of like trying to make. I think training, it can be a lot simpler than a lot of people make it. Right?
And I think it has to. Like when you're working 40 hours a week, you're not a full time athlete. You can't spend 60 hours at the track or
Yeah.
do two sessions of like during that
Yeah.
day. Like I sometimes do a double session on the weekend, like a track and a gym. But when you're a full time working, it makes it difficult. And you gotta have to simplify little things to get the same amount of work in.
Absolutely. I like the idea of just sort of like focusing on the basics and just like cutting out the
Yeah,
fluff.
exactly right. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So you mentioned like a speed session and a tempo session. So like what, I mean, and I know it's going to vary, but what might an example of a speed session look like? Kind of
Well,
distances, volumes, recoveries.
it's really changed over the years for me. Like I've had like 3 different coaches, and they've all done something like really like different. But like a speed, like you could be doing like top end work with your speed work. Like you could have flies in there, you could have some blocks, you could have like repeat 60s. Tempo for me sometimes is like 5 200s, but they're not flying. It's
Mhm.
just more a little bit more of a tempo session. So yeah, mainly like if it's for speed, it's blocks, sled sometimes in there, and some repeat 80s.
So if you're doing like those repeat 80s, for example, like how many 80s are we
So
talking about?
repeat 80s, you probably do 2 sets of 4 and running them in 8-0 to 8-1, roughly.
Okay, all right. And
Yeah.
would you have like a reasonable amount of recovery between those reps?
I back in the day, that's one of my favorite sessions actually, but it's mainly walk back there, and then you probably have like a 10-minute break in between, and then do the second set.
Yeah, okay,
Yeah.
okay. And then with the so you gave us kind of like the time that you'd be running the 80s in. If you're doing those 5.2s, like what sort of pace would you be running those 200s? And again, sort of like what kind of recovery would you be having?
Oh, so for me, I'd probably do a little bit like 20, say like 23 and a half, maybe I'd say.
Okay.
And then you'd probably have 6 minutes in between or 8 minutes in between each one. And you'd probably only just do one set of them as well.
Yeah, okay, okay. I mean, so I was looking through both of your PBs and stuff when I was planning the interview. And I seen so your 21.6 is your PB, but it was into a massive wind. It was like a
Oh, yeah,
3.7 wind, I think it was. I feel like you need to do
yeah, I
some more
think,
twos.
oh, it's one of those things. Like, I don't really like them. I'm not like, I dabble in them. Like, I'm not bad at running them, but I'm just addicted to running fast, like, or trying to run fast over the 100. And I think, just having that whole persona with the 100 meter gets you absolutely hooked. But I'm planning on it this season coming out. We're working on a few things to race me up over the 200. So we'll
Oh,
see how we
okay.
go.
All right,
Yeah.
watch this space. All
Yes.
right, cool. And Bree, so similar question, were you able to sort of like outline kind of like what a typical training week might look like for you? And you're coached by Ryan Hoffman, is that right? That's who's coaching you. Is that correct?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, correct. Yeah, so usually I would do Monday, Wednesday, Friday track, and
Hmm.
then Tuesday, Thursday is gym. I will also have a Pilates session somewhere in the week, just depending on my program and where I can fit it in.
Hmm.
And that's pretty much it.
So
Three
what
tracks,
would
Pilates.
so in terms of with the track sessions, is it that sorry, you said Monday, Wednesday, Friday would be your track sessions, is that right?
Yep.
So would Monday be a speed day? Wednesday would each of those days have sort of like a standard theme, and like what would those themes be if that's the case?
Yeah, well, sometimes it changes, but right now I would do probably speed on a Monday. So probably more focused on accelerations, block starts, maybe some overspeed. So you probably would have seen that on my social media, the little
Yeah.
bungee that like pulls
Yeah.
me. and things up to 60, 80 meters. And then Wednesday's probably more top end focused. Again, probably doing overspeed, and yeah, 80s. And then Fridays are usually speed endurance. So, 200, 150, 120 distances.
Okay. All right. And sorry, I reckon all my guests get frustrated with this because this is an area that I like to probe in. I find it really interesting, sort of like the X's and O's in training setup. But so if you're doing if you're doing like those overspeed runs, again, sort of like how many of those might you do typically in a session?
2.
Okay, all right. And I'm assuming with that you'd have a pretty good recovery.
Yeah. I think my load is quite high. I think I'm pretty good at holding a high load, which is what I've been used to. I've been with Ryan for 11 years now, so I'm quite adapted to his program. But yeah, probably max 4 in a week overspeed.
Okay, all right. And when you say like the speed endurance sessions, so you said kind of like 200s, 150s, 120s, and I find that speed endurance is so different. People, I think, interpret it differently. So you can speak to one person that's sort of talking about speed endurance and they're saying, yeah, we do 2 120s or 15 minutes. And then you speak to another person that's also saying they do speed endurance and it's like, well, we do 8 200s of 2 minutes. And obviously they're very, very different sessions. So I always find it quite interesting to see what people mean when they say speed endurance. So kind of what might like a session look like for that?
Yeah, so say last night I did 200, 150, 120, and I had 15 to 20 minutes recovery in between each of them. So
very I think quality based then.
Yeah, quality over quantity. I don't think I've ever done a 2-minute break, not even in off season. Right. I think the last year I came back and I did 6 200s in that session, and it was with 6 minutes recovery, and they were obviously a bit slower, so I could get through the entire session. But yeah, for me, it's always quality over quantity.
Okay. Yeah, cool. And sorry, going back to the speed session. So if you're doing like let's say you did 2 overspeed runs, would that be the whole session or would there be some unassisted runs in there as well?
Yeah, that's just the start of the session, to be honest. Usually I'd warm up, probably do 2 flies. So maybe like a 40 build, 20 fly just to get warm. And then I'd probably do 2 overspeeds, and then I'd probably get into block starts, maybe like 330s, 250s, and then 2 rolling 80s might be a session.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, quite a solid session, but
yeah. And again, throughout that, the recoveries would be, I don't want to say generous, but that they would allow you to make sure that the quality is you're able to maintain high quality.
Yeah, usually I kind of have probably like 5 minutes in between 30-meter block starts maybe. And then if they're 80s, maybe 8 minutes. Yeah, nothing like 15 to 20. Only the long runs get that break.
Yeah. Okay. All right, cool. Thank you so much for sharing, both of you. I appreciate it. And so switching up, and I mean, Bree, we've sort of touched on this a little bit, kind of talking about some of the technical things that you're working on in terms of, you spoke about coming out of blocks, and I brought up your ankle position. But I was just wondering, so again, I think that cueing is something that's so like individual, and different people, they find that. So it might be that if a coach were to give both of you the same cues, like that might work great for one of you, but not for the other one.
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering, Bree, what sort of cues do you have that you feel like are quite effective for you?
Yeah, so I've had a few cues or trialed a few over the time, mainly in regards to my block starts. And I think I do pick up different cues quite quickly. Maybe it's my dancing background. I'm quite like body aware. But specifically at the moment, I am trying to flick my left hand forward earlier coming out of the blocks rather than, coming up first. So I've been putting like a piece of tape on the ground and just trying to hit that with my hand and just filming it to be able to see if I can do that. I think that's getting me into a better angle, because sometimes I just stand straight up and don't really drive forward. And then also the dorsiflex issue coming out of the blocks, just trying to think about dragging that toe up as I'm coming out of the blocks, just so I'm, getting that drive back rather than just like blocking. Because at the moment I feel like I'm overstriding coming out of the blocks and my toes are pointed, and there's so many things I could work on, but at the moment it's the hand and the dorsiflex foot out of the blocks.
Yeah. Okay, cool. And I think that I love the fact that it's sort of like streamlined, that you're just thinking about 2 things, and going back to what kind of Matt was saying about not having things too complex. Again, I think it's the same kind of theme, just a slightly different application here. But again, trying to run nearly as fast as you can. Probably can't have 5 or 6 different things going on in your mind that you're trying to execute at the same time. It's just not going to work. So 1 or 2, I think that's a great way to approach it.
Yeah, and then like I was in blocks on the weekend that had sensors. So if you're thinking about too many things in blocks, you're probably going to end up false starting, if I'm honest with you. So I think about these things in training, but I think when you get to race day, it has to come naturally. So
I completely agree. I think that you're trying to, the way I kind of look at it is that training is used to try and set up your autopilot so that you can just rely on that, like you say, once it comes to race day. I mean, I've heard kind of like lots of top sprinters saying that they don't even really remember the race. It's just a blur. Like, so they're just
that
kind
was
of
me last weekend.
right. Okay. Yeah. Cool. And then Matt, so similar question to you in terms of the queuing. What are some of the cues that you feel kind of resonate quite well with yourself?
Yeah, I think the big thing for me, been working on a little bit, trying to get a little bit more clarity before each rep for me. And actually having that clarity and being like, okay, what do I have to really do here? And been working on with me to try and get me to stay forward a little bit more throughout while I'm accelerating and slowly start coming up. Sometimes I'll absolutely blast one and then all of a sudden just bang, pop straight back up. Rather than, so for me, we're just trying to work on just getting me to stay over and slowly come up. And then once I'm actually at the top end, and my top end's not the greatest, so I'm always like that person. I get there, get to them, and I try and bury the person next to me instead of being like, get on the accelerator. When I hit top speed, just hold it. And that's what we've been working with me with a lot of my fly work and everything, to get there and hold it on the accelerator, not try and push it through the floor.
Yeah. I like that.
Yeah, because I used to struggle really bad. Like I'd get out, and then the person next to me was like, no, I've got him. Instead of just relaxing and holding it and then getting my knees up and just getting tall and running, I just try and bury it, and I just start getting crunched over knees and start dropping because I'm trying too hard rather than just holding it there and just letting it do the work.
Yeah. There was a Swedish coach, Håkan Andersson, and he said something about, I think he had this quote which I really liked, but it was like, dare to race at 98%. And I just like that concept of just being able to, you're probably slightly better, just having that edge slightly off. But I think it's something that's probably so difficult to do in a racing environment.
Yeah, definitely. And I think for me, like training, like sometimes like some people will watch me like, oh, you got to fix this, you got to fix that. And I work with my coaches and stuff like that. And sometimes I don't nail it. And they're like, oh, you're just running, you just absolutely pig root it. Sometimes I do. I just absolutely pig root it, but it works for me. But there's other times that when it gets to race day, that all of a sudden we've been working on something for 2 months ago, and all of a sudden it will just click. It just clicks and clicks and clicks. And I think when you were saying about the top sprinters, like I've experienced that. You get there, you run around 10:34. It just, that whole weekend, everything just clicked, and I just can't remember the race, and everything was just autopilot. My knees were up. I nailed every execution, drive phase, everything. So yeah, that's very interesting.
Yeah. Fantastic. Yeah, I think it's I love the whole concept about the accelerator. I think that I quite like using the word like squeeze. So you're just sort of like gradually squeezing that accelerator rather than like you said, trying to put your foot through the floor or whatever. I think it's just I guess like the concept is patience, isn't it? It's just kind of like having
definitely. And I think the best person that ever did that, like probably Maurice Green was the exact same. Just slowly getting up, and then he's up, he just held it and just kept going.
Yeah. It was quite interesting on this point. I had a coffee with a guy that he won an Olympic gold medal in the 200. And his top speed, that was his thing. And he made this comment, and he said that there were a couple of guys that I used to race that were always fantastic out the blocks. And he said that whilst they might be ahead of me physically at 30 meters, it didn't necessarily mean they were ahead of me strategically at 30 meters. And I thought that was a really good way of looking at it. It was quite like a profound way of just sort of an articulate way of saying.
I think that's a big thing. Like on there, like, people look at me like, oh, top end work. And I've spoken to Bree about this in the past, like, and I don't know who quoted it. So I can't really tell, but they said, work on your strengths until they become stronger, work on your weaknesses until they become strengths. And that's a big thing for me. I've never come away from, like, I've always got such a good 40 in a block start. I've never come away from, I've made that stronger. And then my weakness in the top end has become my strength. And I think too many athletes and coaches focus so much on, I've said this to Bree, like, oh, top end, like, but you work on that, then all of a sudden you lose your first 40, your first 60 of your race. And vice versa, like you focus too much on your blocks and you go through 40 meters or 60 meters faster, it's going to probably impact your top end towards the end as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really interesting point, because you might get to, I don't know, like if you were to focus just purely on your top end, then you might find that you get your top, I don't know, from 40 to 100, maybe a tenth quicker. but then you've lost 3/10 in the first 40 because you're focusing on that, and then you end up slower.
Exactly right.
Yeah. I think that's a really interesting point. I want to speak to about a little bit about kind of managing your, but both of you are really busy, so I think it's going to be an interesting part of the conversation. But managing your sporting lifestyle off the track. So in terms of recovery, nutrition, sleep, hydration. I'll start with you, Matt. Like, how closely are you monitoring those things, and how do you go about sort of managing it?
Yeah, I think it's really changed over the years throughout my career. Like one time I used to be, I was so obsessed with it, like tracking every macros, this. And it got to a point where it was kind of unhealthy for me that I was like, well, like I can't eat that because it doesn't fit in my macros. Like, and I've kind of been a little bit more flexible about it now. Like I know what I can eat, what I can't eat for the nutrition side, and what I really need to get the best performance out of me. Same as sleep. Like I used to wear my Apple Watch to bed every day, and I'd be waking up every day like, oh, yeah, my Apple Watch says I've had 8 hours sleep, or that was an average sleep. And it was good to start off with, but then it got to a point where it was probably pretty bad because I was letting a device tell me whether I'd actually felt rested or not. And I'd be looking at it like, oh, I've only had 6 hours sleep, or I'm going to have a really bad training session, which probably isn't always the case. And when you're working, like I wake up at 4:30 every day to go to work, don't finish till 2. Then I got to try and train after that, and then get home, prep everything, and then try and get to bed. So that part of that's why I got rid of the Apple Watch. And I just try and make sure when I get home, have at least a nap in the afternoon if I can before training. And then when I get home from training, get everything done, prep it the night before for work the next day or anything I have to do, and then get straight eat dinner and then straight to bed. And being hydrated, I think, is a real big key. Like I've always been someone that drinks a lot of water. So I aim for at least like 3.5 liters a day for me. So yeah, that's about it.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point. Like, relying on like sports tech. I always think that if you woke up in the morning of the Olympic final and your Apple Watch told you had a shit night's sleep, I don't know how. Like, I can just see that being a really negative situation for some people.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's why I eventually got rid of it. And I wear it every now and then, but I don't really check it, how much sleep I've had, or if it's telling me if I had a good sleep or not, because I don't really want that impacting on my day ahead or training or even racing.
Yeah. Okay. So it sounds like you're just taking, I guess I would describe it as very much like a common sense approach.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. All right. And what about yourself, Bree? Is it the same kind of approach for you, or do you approach it a little bit differently?
No, I'm very relaxed with recovery. I've never tracked anything. I mean, I have a good idea and a good knowledge on what I should be eating and what fuels me and what helps me recover. I also have a great dietitian who helps me with all of that stuff up the QAS. So I've got a good support team around me to make sure I am fueling myself correctly, when I'm traveling, racing. And the most important one for me lately has been like being able to back up day after day racing. I really struggle with nutrition there. And when I'm racing, I forget about eating half the time. Like, you're all excited, you're in the moment, and you just forget to eat, and then you got to back up 2 days later as well. So just making sure that I'm eating the right stuff to make sure that I can get through those 3 days of training at my best or racing at my best is super important to me. And then sleep, obviously a big one. I don't have anything that tracks anything. I've never tracked anything. I know a lot of people use those Aura rings as well, and the bands. I think great idea. Awesome. I get it. But like, I think, you've got to weigh up like the mental aspect of it when things aren't going so well. And I don't know. That's probably not for me either. Like I can usually feel when I've got enough sleep, or just, I know that like 9 hours sleep, 8 hours sleep is good enough for me to get through the day and train well and recover and whatnot. But I used to be big on recovery centers, ice bars.
Okay.
Compression boots. I don't really do a whole lot of that anymore. I mean, I have access to compression boots at work and at the QAS gym, and I use them every now and then, but I'm not extreme on them. I could probably do more with my recovery, but at the moment it's just very, very relaxed, and I take it as it comes.
And I think that's great. I think that being relaxed about it means that it's something that you're not stressed about. And I think sometimes like having, I don't know, really intensive recovery protocols that stress you out, then the stress outweighs the positive of the recovery in itself, if that makes sense. And it's really funny that you talk about kind of like the ice baths and the compression boots and stuff. And at the college that I coach at, that's how the athletes, they view recovery. And I'm like, what that's fine. That's like the final 1%. Like you need to make sure that if you've had like a cheese sandwich for dinner and you've slept 3 hours, then the recovery boots probably aren't doing that much. Neither's the massage gun. So let's get like the big rocks in place first. And I think that it's very much sort of like the final 1%. But if you're getting you need to be eating, you need to be sleeping right, you need to be hydrating, and that's going to give you like the bulk of your results in that regard.
Yeah, they're definitely the three main ones, 100%.
Yeah,
and the rest are definitely 100%. But yeah, not to say I don't do them, but yeah, I used to do like ice bars, hot and cold, and the recovery boots maybe once or twice a week. And I used to get stressed if I couldn't get in. Like, as I said, I'm a very busy person. So just getting to the recovery center, finding time to actually do that. Like, if I couldn't do that before I raced on the weekend, I'd start like, getting stressed.
Right.
It's like Matt said with his, not knowing he's had enough sleep. It's just like stresses you out, and just kind of find away with it and realize, oh, hey, I'm still PBing without having to do this twice a week. Like, it doesn't impact my performance a whole lot. Like, yes, it's good, but I don't need it twice a week.
Yeah. Okay. So I think that's you don't want to be dependent or reliant on anything like that. Yeah. Okay. Right. Last question then. So to both of you, I'll start with you on this one, Bree. So favorite and least favorite track sessions. I feel like most athletes have a session where they look on the piece of paper, they turn up to training, coach says what the track session is, and they're like, oh, not today. So I was interested to find out what that is.
Yeah, so definitely for me is the speed endurance. I mean, it's a love-hate relationship. I know that it's good for me, but I just hate being in that lactic, just on the ground. Like, I know when Matt used to train with me, he'd be like, get up, you got another rep. I was like, piss off. Like, I just want to be alone on the ground. Like, I feel like I'm going to be sick. So I don't like those sessions, but I'll do it anyway. And I'm lucky enough that my program's usually the same. Like, it's always the same. So I don't get, speed endurance today just thrown at me. So I'm usually well prepared for it.
Okay,
but my
no nasty surprises.
Yeah, my favorite would have to be block starts. I mean, obviously it's the weakest part of my race, but I enjoy trying to get better at them. I think they're exciting, they're fun. And just, constantly trying to work on them is exciting for me. Yeah.
Okay. And what about you, Matt? Same question. Favorite and least favorite sessions?
Yeah. Look, I don't know if there really is a least favorite.
Come on, man. There must be.
I'm not too sure. Like, it's one of those things I like to hurt when I train. Pretty much, like it's a weird way. So, like, if I had to say anything involved with lactic, I'm not the biggest fan of. Like, if you're doing flat out twos, like repeat twos, whatever, I'm not the biggest fan of it. I'll complain a lot, but after it, I don't secretly probably actually like it, so it's not too bad. But my favorite probably sessions for me, anything like Bree said, blocks, anything like speed, like those repeat 80s I was talking about, sleds. And I don't mind a little bit of plyos in there as well. Like when we do a plyometric session, I don't mind doing that either. That's one of my favorite sessions too.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Fantastic. I'm still waiting for somebody to come on here and say that they enjoy like a lactic session, an endurance-based session. I haven't had anyone on here yet, but I'm hoping that one day maybe.
Maybe one day.
All right, cool. Well, I just want to finish off by thanking both of you for finding some time. I know you're both busy, but to come on here and speak with me today, I really appreciate it. I would love for you guys, can you just kind of plug your social medias for us so that anybody that's listening knows where to find you? So I'll start with you, Matt.
Yeah, so I don't really have too much social media. So if you get me on Facebook, it's Matt Rizzo. Instagram is matt.rizzo. And I think my TikTok's the exact same as well. So if you want to follow along,
you're a TikToker.
TikTok. I don't post as much as Bree does, but I'll probably post it like 3 times on there. But yeah, it's there.
All right. Are you on Twitter? I think you're on Twitter as well.
I think I actually am on Twitter as well. I think it's Matt_Rizzo, I believe. I don't use Twitter too much, but yeah.
I get that impression from the fact that you said, am I on there? I get the impression that you don't use it too much from that. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, cool. And what about yourself, Bree?
Yeah, so Facebook, same thing, just Bree Masters. Instagram's probably my main platform. Bree Masters with 3 E's. My middle name's Elise with an E. So some people think it just says Bree Masters, but there's an extra E in there for my middle name. Right. And I think I built the Instagram page. That was the only handle available. So that's that. My TikTok, I think, is the same. And I have Twitter, but again, don't use it. I mean, in Australia, I don't think many people use Twitter. It's basically a bit more used in the US. Would you say a bit more popular there?
Yeah, probably. I guess like with my experience of Twitter, like I used it a little bit, but once I got into college coaching, it was quite a big like recruiting tool. So trying to find athletes. So a lot of high school athletes seem to have like Twitter, and it was a way to interact with them. And I suppose like Instagram works like that a little bit, but I've definitely had more use of Twitter doing for that. So yeah, I don't know. Maybe it is a little bit bigger over here.
Yeah, I think Twitter's really good to see results as well, like live results.
Sure.
Like a lot. That's why I have it, so you can see that stuff, but don't really post a whole lot on there.
Yeah, okay. And do you want to plug your LSKD's in social media as well?
Yeah, it's just LSKD.
Okay,
There's
that's
also
easy.
the USA one. So if you're based in the USA, lskd.usa.
Okay.
And then the main page is just LSKD.
Okay.
TikTok and Instagram. Yeah.
All right. Okay. Thank you so much again for both of you to come on. Yeah, really appreciate it. And I just want to wish you both, obviously, Bree, I know that you're traveling out to Europe, so all the best there. I'm sure it'll go fantastic, and fingers crossed that you're going to be in Budapest. Matt, I'm looking forward to seeing some 200s in late 2023, early 2024, in the Australian domestic season. But yeah, thank you both for agreeing to have a chat with me. It's been great, and yeah, good luck for the rest of the year. All right.
No, Rizzo, thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.